Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Career Connect. Before we begin, I'd like to open with a land acknowledgement. Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. As well, we recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. So I'm Joe Bedard, and I will be your event moderator. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the Department of Chemistry here at Dalhousie University. And this is the third consecutive year for Career Connect, an alumni-focused discussion that shares the thoughts and perspective of the alumni who completed a graduate program in science at Dalhousie University. And this year, alumni panels includes Julie Reimer. She received her master's in marine management in 2016 and is currently a senior policy advisor with Fisheries and Oceans Canada and a part-time instructor with the Marine Affairs program at Dalhousie University. Alex Cole received her Master of Marine Management in 2018 and is currently a Fisheries Management Specialist and Research Lead with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. And last but not least, Frederica Jacks received her Master of Resource and Environmental Management in 2020, in addition to her BSc in 2018. Today, Frederica is a Species at Risk Biologist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And we hope that today's conversations will shine a light on graduate programs at Dal, and that current graduate students or those who have recently completed a graduate program will have the information, insight, and professional advice from our alumni guests. And then finally, before we begin today's discussion, I would like to welcome our Dean of Science, Dr. Chuck McDonald, to say a few words. In addition to being Dean, Chuck is a chemistry alum, completing his BSc and PhD in Dalhousie University, and he also works in a field very similar to mine. So he's been an invaluable resource to me, which is saying a lot considering that he also has to deal with the responsibilities of Dean. So thank you, Chuck, and welcome.
Well, thanks a lot, Joe. So first of all, I'd like to recognize Joe himself. So he recently finished first at the Falling Walls Global Competition in Berlin, Germany. Congratulations. We're really proud of your outstanding achievement, and thank you for moderating today's event.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Faculty of Science community, I'm thrilled to be here for the third consecutive Career Connects conversation. This is a wonderful partnership with our colleagues in graduate studies, and I hope to see more events like this in the future. As a former Dal chemistry graduate student myself, I recognize the challenges and opportunities that exist while being a student and when you finish your studies at Dal. To our online listeners, your Dalhousie community is here for you. We hope today's event will provide you with insightful information to guide and support you on your journey. So next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Mabel Ho, Director of Professional Development and Student Engagement.
Thank you, Chuck and Chuck, for your lovely introductions. We're excited to partner with the Faculty of Science to host this event. This panel is part of the Faculty of Graduate Studies Grad PD programming. Grad PD is a centralized hub designed for graduate students in mind to support their professional development journey, whereby they can earn a certificate upon completion. I'm delighted to hear from our alumni panelists today and want to thank them for their willingness to share their experiences as we listen to their career path. I would like to hand things back over to Joe, and I hope you enjoy the event.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. McDonald and Dr. Ho. So now we can begin our formal discussion, guys. So for our online listeners, you can feel free to post your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll answer them during the Q&A session during the last 10 to 15 minutes. All panelists will have the opportunity to answer each question. So if you feel like you want to say something, just raise your hand. So let's start. And I'm going to start with Julie when I ask this question. Tell us about your academic journey and what made you want to explore grad studies at Dal.
I feel like it's unfair to ask me first because that exploration happened almost a decade ago now for me. But I tried to reflect this morning on who I was back then and what I was looking for. And this has been true for all of my academic sort of pursuits. Is I'm really driven by program and not necessarily place or a particular university. What I was looking for when I came to Dal was the right fit in what the program was about. And marine affairs is really about interdisciplinarity and asking questions and doing so in a way that's about solving problems. Those are the things that I was looking for when I was finishing my undergrad. I knew that doing just biology wasn't enough. And I was really interested in sort of big picture thinking. And like a lot of people, when you finish your undergrad and you're feeling really inspired by 4 years of intensive learning, hopeful that there are solutions and people that want to build them. So that's what I was looking for. And Dal was just a great fit because it had that marine affairs program, and because Dal is so linked to the ocean science community and community of practice. It's really a perfect spot to try to bring research, policy, and management all together. I think that's my answer.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Alex, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of the things that Julie said. We took the same master's program, and kind of similar things is what I was looking for. So I actually grew up in BC, and I knew kind of from an early age that I wanted to work kind of with animals, and I had an extreme love and passion for whales. And so I kind of always knew that I wanted to work in that kind of wildlife conservation realm. Although originally I kind of thought, similar to other people who kind of work or want to work with animals, is that I originally wanted to be a veterinarian. And similar to what kind of Julie said there, where when you go and do your bachelor's, so I've got a bachelor in science and animal biology from the University of Guelph, which is home to the Ontario Vet College. So I was very much kind of mentally in that kind of realm. But through my experiences in my undergrad, I started to consider other avenues that weren't vet school, started to think a little bit more about research, started to think a little bit more about just different kind of perspectives and different career options. And I have a little bit of a different kind of route into it. So I did take about a 5-year break in between doing my bachelor's and coming back to school for my master's. So I went back to BC. After that, I did a bunch of different internships, looked at different job opportunities so I could gain a bit of experience first. And I actually have a bit of a different background. I worked in the zoological field as an animal keeper. I worked in whale watching. I worked as a marine mammal trainer at the Vancouver Aquarium. And while I loved those jobs, I knew what I wanted to do was to get back into that more conservation-minded career. And I had actually learned about the marine affairs program when I was still doing my bachelor's, and I was kind of looking at what those opportunities were as next steps. And it was the same thing. It wasn't really a place thing, although I'd heard very good things about marine biology programs at Dal. But with the marine affairs program, I knew that because it was that interdisciplinary type of degree, that would be the right fit for me moving into that more conservation minded type of work, which is really a completely interdisciplinary field.
So you guys both felt that the marine affairs program was able to really like let you take action, or it was a very actionable way to like use the knowledge that you built up through your careers in your undergrad at that point.
Yeah, I would say so.
Great.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to what Alex said. Is it's not a linear path, and I suspect that Frederica is about to say a very similar thing. There's bumps and different jobs and a lot of serendipity and happenstance that leads you to where you end up. And a lot of times we have these ideas in undergrad of a particular career name because a veterinarian is something that we know as children. But do you ever dream of being a senior policy advisor? Probably no. Doesn't sound very cool.
Yeah. And Frederica, how about yourself?
Yeah, I guess my path is a little more linear in terms of timelines, but then after my graduate degree, it's been all over the place. But I grew up in Halifax, and I did my undergrad and my graduate degrees both at Dalhousie, so I've been here forever. But but I did general biology for my undergrad. I initially, excuse me, I initially thought about doing marine biology, but I didn't really want to be restricted with the courses that I could take. Throughout my undergrad, I've found that I'm much more of a generalist. I have passions for the ocean. I love insects. I love conservation. So I was able to take all of these electives throughout my undergrad that kind of allowed me to explore all these different avenues. And I didn't really have a specific job that I was looking for towards the end of that. Didn't really know where I wanted to go, but I started thinking about graduate school a little more. And since I'm more of a generalist, I didn't quite have one project that I could see myself doing for multiple years for a thesis. So I was looking into more course-based master's programs and came across the management, Master of Resource and Environmental Management, the MREM degree at Dal. And I thought that that would be a really great fit. Again, I mean, I do love living in Halifax, but it did seem like a great fit for me. And since it was course-based, you still got to do a little project at the end of it, sort of like a mini thesis. But one big part of it was an internship, which I thought would be a really great experience as a graduate student to get a sort of more professional internship. So yeah, I mean, I went into that program and had a really great time. I got to be in, still a classroom setting, but I think, like you said, Julie, there was a lot of interdisciplinary sort of work going on in that program. So people from different backgrounds all coming together and doing different projects about construction, about, urban forestry, all sorts of different things. And then from there, I've just sort of had a very diverse path afterwards, but certainly going through my undergrad and my graduate studies at Dal, it's prepared me to sort of be able to take on any challenge.
Well, that leads me kind of nicely into my next question. I'll start with you, Frederica, but what value do you think that the Dal degree brought to your current position?
Yeah. So like I said, it was very multidisciplinary. I got to do my internship with Parks Canada. I got to work in Sable Island National Park Reserve, which was a really unique experience. Very grateful for that. But I got to work on other things, like I said, urban forestry. I wrote some report on the Cogswell District redevelopment project. So I sort of had all these different conservation and environmental management projects, but through sort of a conservation lens. And after my graduate studies, which I finished at the end of 2019, I did a lot of communications work. I worked for a nonprofit for a little while doing communications, which totally really wasn't something that I had done during either of my degrees, but it was a great experience. I worked on a few contracts. I was a project manager for a little while. I was a coordinator for a few different programs. I worked with invasive species. I was a lab technician for Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And then I found my way to this position, which to be able to call yourself a biologist when you have a biology degree, I think is a really great, it's really nice to see that come to fruition. But I do a lot of writing mostly in my current job. It's not really a field-based position, but I find it's easy for me since I have that management background from my graduate studies, as well as the knowledge of biology and conservation, putting that together with my enjoyment of writing and editing, which maybe not many people enjoy doing that. I found it's kind of all come down into a nice funnel towards this position. It's really prepared me well for it.
And Alex, have you felt the same about your, obviously you have you might take a slightly different role right now, but.
Yeah, I think that my degree brought tons of value. So similar where Marine Affairs also is a course-based program, you have an internship, you do kind of a thesis graduate project. And for my internship, I actually did it with the Canadian Wildlife Federation, who I am now still working with to this day. And so my supervisor actually offered me a job right out of graduation. So the work that I do now is entirely actually directly linked to everything that I did for my internship and my graduate project. So I use kind of everything that I learned during my graduate studies in my day-to-day. Like I mentioned, I'm working for a conservation organization, and kind of in a nutshell, what we do is applied conservation, which considers both natural and social sciences, which is exactly kind of what we did throughout the Marine Affairs program. Throughout the coursework, you spend a lot of time kind of developing those critical thinking skills, learning the importance of different stakeholder needs and kind of the complexity of meeting those needs while trying to balance that kind of environmental component. And then in my case, ocean marine related things. What we're kind of looking at is looking at ways to understand how we're using the ocean, how well the changes that we're making are at helping, specifically to protect whales, and then finding those innovative ways to improve those conservation efforts. So we work really closely with the fishing industry, people who within the communities who rely so heavily on the ocean, and knowing a little bit more of that kind of stakeholder needs that we kind of learned through the program leads directly into everything that we kind of do within my position. And then from the more sciencey side, I was able to turn my graduate project into a fully fledged research program that I now lead, in addition to kind of all of the more social science side of things.
And as a quick follow-up, do you feel like your Dal degree prepared you well for dealing with the Department of independent fisheries and whatnot? Do you feel like you had a good preparation of that kind of interface with industry?
I want to say yes and no all at the same time. Yes, in terms of the theory behind it, but in practice, it's a little bit different. It's something that I was reflecting on with some of the other questions that we have kind of throughout the day. I mean, working with the fishing industry, there are challenges with it, of course. Yeah, I'd say in theory, because you do learn about different stakeholders, different stakeholder needs, you kind of learn that there is going to be competing interests with those different groups. So it does prepare you in that way. But of course, doing it in practice is always a little bit different.
Yeah, great. And Julie, of course, you've had a bit of a gap between your grad degree and where your current position. So do you feel like you've been able to carry through what your experiences and what you've learned throughout?
Yeah. I don't know that I want to reflect on Dal in my current position, but Marine Affairs changed my life. When I came to this program, I was a biologist, and it really wasn't until sitting in these interdisciplinary spaces, talking with people that work at DFO or people that work in different NGOs, that I really started to change the way that I was approaching science and research. And I often say that I came into MMM as a natural scientist, and I walked out the door as a social scientist. And it set me up to do my PhD. I had this different perspective of really wanting to solve problems and think about ocean science topics and different issues from a management perspective, and always with the intention of making something useful before making a primary publication. And that just changes the way that a PhD unfolds and the way that you approach science in general. But I'm still very, very connected to the Marine Affairs programs. I teach a course that I took, which is always a fun journey to see how much you've changed since engaging with that exact same course material, and how you want to bring it to new graduate students. And having the connections of this program really does have immense value in my career. It keeps the work that I do in DFO, which is largely about linking science and research and best practices with the way we do things in Canada, kind of keeps me grounded in this space of management, which sort of lives between those two worlds. Yeah, it's just had a huge influence on really my whole career post MMM, despite some bumps in the road. And I was laughing at Frederica doing sort of comms work, because we do often end up in jobs that sound right, but they're right for someone else. And I used to work in environmental education, and it was interesting and exciting, but I don't know anything about ducks. I worked for Ducks Unlimited Canada. They're a lovely organization, but I'm not a duck expert. And education is not my jam. That's not the space I was supposed to be. And you kind of learn along the way what you're looking for in a career. Because as I said, nobody sets out thinking, yeah, I'm going to go be a senior policy advisor at DFO. This is not the job that I thought I would end up in either, but it's great.
And just to end on you, Frederica, do you find that your degree is also in management? Do you find that you've also had to both Alex and Julie mentioned that they have kind of gained some experience or they left their degrees almost with social science background. Do you find the same for yourself as well?
I would say so, yes. Definitely with all the different sort of course material that we had, and not just focusing on one particular subject. We did have, social aspects of a project. We had a huge group project called a tri-course, which it was a group of us. I mentioned we did it on the Cogswell District Redevelopment Project. So we looked at the environmental factors. We looked at the social impacts of something like that. So we did look at all of these different problems through the lens of social as well as sort of the environmental lens. So I have gotten a lot of value out of being able to look at things from all different sides.
Yeah, and I mean, as a current PhD in chemistry, it's that one's a little tricky for me to answer, because typically it's a physical science or a hard science. But I mean, I think that Dal has done a good job, at least in the way that they've tried to intersperse like kind of like the human aspect of something like chemistry. I mean, at the end of the day, we're doing this stuff for humanity. We're not doing it just for our own egos to be in the lab and making new little chemicals. So I think that my experience with Dal has been positive in that sense. That I'm reminded of the humanity of what we're doing, that we're trying to change lives for the better, ideally. Now I'm going to ask about any of the obstacles that we've all had to face throughout our entire careers. I'm going to start with Frederica. Did you find like you faced any obstacles to get to the position you're in today?
I sure have. I would say the biggest obstacle in general over like from my undergrad to master's into where I am is just uncertainty. In your undergrad, you're not really sure what you want to do. I chose to go and do graduate studies. Even with my internship, I loved working for Parks Canada, and I really enjoyed working for government. But even right now, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I think, I've had a lot of opportunities to do things that I've tried to say yes to as many as I thought, would be useful for my career. But ultimately, there's a lot of uncertainty in job contracts. There's uncertainty in, is this the right job for me? What happens if I choose to leave here? I've, been on EI before. I was unemployed for a little while. So I would say, the biggest challenge is just not knowing what you want to do or where you want to go, or if this is the right choice for me, and then having to sort of jump into the deep end and just live with your decisions.
And how about you, Julie? Do you feel like uncertainty has been a common throughput throughout your
Lots
career?
of uncertainty, especially like post-master's degree. There are, for lots of people, really linear experiences. Like Alex got a job with their internship post right out of MMM, which is amazing. But then there's also lots of people that sort of toss all the cards up in the air and don't know what they're doing. And so I'm going to take you on a little journey. When I finished my MMM, I TA'd full time for one semester at Dal. And then when those all finished, I went to work as a university recruiter, and I hated it. It was not for me. I did that for 5 months, but in the first 2 weeks, I started looking for a PhD project. And there are all kinds of barriers to that as well. When you do these professional programs or you don't have a thesis, there's lots of pushback on whether or not you're qualified to do a PhD. Spoiler, you definitely are. After I finished that recruiting job, I was also unemployed for 6 months, and I had a really hard time finding work. I'm unilingual, and I'm from New Brunswick, so I have a very hard time finding work because I don't speak French. So if you're unilingual, it's never a bad time to start picking up a second language. And I was rejected by so many PhD projects along the way, looking for the right one, both for me and for supervisors. And some of them were truly heartbreaking, but in the end, they weren't my project. They weren't the right one for me. And I worked in environmental education for a little while, felt like I had, made it. I was doing an environmental sector job, and I did this environmental master's program. And then my PhD kind of just fell in my lap. My supervisor applied for me and came back to me and said, I've got this project that's more open-ended. Maybe you're interested in it. And off I went. And when I was doing my PhD, there are still so many obstacles. Joe can relate. And I'm a first-generation student, so I had no idea what I was doing or if I belonged there. But, a false sense of high confidence is a good thing for you. And a PhD is one of those things that you get as much out as you put in. So like Frederica, I said yes to everything. I don't know that I would recommend that for your mental health, but anything that could help me make my research matter or find that connection to humanity, like you talked about, Joe. I did all of those things during my PhD, and it totally changed who I was on the other side of it, and the opportunities that were open to me when I finished.
And Alex, you obviously, your path is much more linear, but I'm sure that's not to say that it was a linear straight line up. How did you feel you were, what obstacles do you feel like you had to overcome, or how do you?
Yeah, so, like you mentioned, I did get, a job right out of my degree with my internship host, and I have been very fortunate to have that. There is, of course, uncertainty with it. I'm not permanent staff, I'm contract staff. I work for a nonprofit organization. It's all grant funded as well. Again, we've been sort of fortunate enough with the funding that's been available. But that's not something that's necessarily always going to be there and always in place. So that's something that's kind of back of mind. But something for me that I think a lot of people can relate to, that I feel like that I've struggled with, not necessarily as an obstacle per se, but definitely a challenge that has kind of permeated into my kind of career since finishing the Marine Affairs program, is imposter syndrome. Again, like I said, I think a lot of people can really relate it to that. So at the start of me working with CWF, I questioned myself a lot. I was an animal keeper from BC. I was now working directly with the fishing industry that I didn't have any sort of past experience with, in a part of the world I didn't grow up in, talking to them about a species, which most of our work is on North Atlantic right whales, that I only learned about when I moved to Halifax. I spent a lot of time dedicating myself to learning the ins and outs of the industry about whales, but you still end up questioning kind of your validity, especially when you're early career as well. I questioned whether I'd be taken seriously. I don't really have necessarily advice on how to overcome that. I just worked really hard over the last years, and it really comes down to building your kind of confidence. So I'm happy to say I don't really have those doubts as much anymore, but that's something that I think just, like I said, permeates into every aspect along the way, regardless of kind of what your path ends up looking like.
Yeah, and I'll say imposter syndrome seems to just be a common thing that happens when you're going through these disciplines, when you're doing graduate studies anywhere. I mean, Frederica, did you feel like you had to overcome that as well?
I still do to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously, you know, you have to, I think someone mentioned, you know, false confidence or like high confidence before. It's something you have to work on constantly. There's always things that you're not going to know. You just have to become comfortable with that. You can't possibly know everything, but you have to believe that you are more than capable of doing what you're doing. And clearly we all are. If we are in our positions, you know, other people think we are, and we're doing good work, but it is something that certainly I still struggle with sometimes.
And Julie, of course, you've gone through several degrees. You're now a lecturer here. Do you still find that you have to struggle with imposter syndrome?
I literally had a dream last night that I was teaching a university course, and all of the students were like up and dancing, and I had no authority over them. So yes, I still struggle with that. And you do get better at it. You get better at the confidence and knowing sort of where you belong and the value that you bring to your team. And Frederica's right, we're in these jobs because we do them well. But like I did a PhD in geography, had never taken a geography course until I showed up for my PhD. So sometimes the discipline things and the things that feel like an imposter sort of impact, they're not real. They don't matter. You belong exactly in the spot that you're in.
Yeah, I'd speak to that as well. I mean, a lot of the times people come into different science degrees or different faculties or different departments, I should say, and they had, even with a completely different background, they are able to excel in the role, because at the end of the day, it's, you know, it is an attitude towards wanting to learn, and it's also just you can build foundational skills in other degrees if you want to enter different grad programs, I find. So
nothing teaches you that you don't know everything like doing a PhD will.
Yes. And sometimes it's a good feeling. Not always, but sometimes it's a good feeling to realize. And then you realize that no one else knows everything as well. So I'm going to ask, starting with Julie, what do you enjoy most about your current position?
I get to use exactly what my PhD was in every day. And it sounds silly, but that's a huge privilege, and very, very rare. It is difficult to find the exact perfect job, post-master's degree, post-PhD, whatever it is. But my job is so much fun because I have lots of autonomy over the way that we're developing something that has the potential to be really transformative in Canada, and that's exciting. It's challenging. Every day is different. And I've managed to find ways in my current job to keep those connections with the Marine Affairs program. And I supervise students out of that program, and I teach in that program. And I still sort of maintain some international academic projects and collaborations. So I've carved out this niche where I get to do all of the things that I love and that sort of bring me joy and fill me up. And have sort of woven them together into this position at DFO, which I really never thought I would be in. For me, it's all about finding the job where I feel like I'm having the most impact. And for right now, that's exactly where I am, but it might not be forever. And that's okay. Jobs change.
And Frederica, how about yourself? I mean, you obviously, I don't know, do you use everything that you learned in your degree in your current job as well, and does that give you, or is there something else that sparks joy in your job?
My degree, I think, has permeated mostly every job that I've had since, you know, graduating with it in some aspect. My job currently is like really heavily focused on writing documents. I write recovery documents for freshwater species at risk. I will shout out freshwater mussels because they are severely underrated. So being able to work with these species and write documents that are like directly contributing to their management and recovery is a really, like, I think that that's really great to be able to work on something like that. For me personally, species at risk are something that, you know, I hope more people will care about. More species are becoming, you know, more at risk by the day, really throughout the world. But being able to physically write these documents that everyone, like anyone can go and access them on, the Fisheries and Oceans Canada website, the Species at Risk Act. So I think that I just really enjoy knowing that I'm directly contributing to the management of these species.
And Alex, do you feel something similar, given that you also work in conservation?
Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned it a couple of times. The work that we do, it's applied conservation. I see, real world changes happening because of the work that we do, and that is just something that is like just really, really fulfilling, knowing that what you kind of have dedicated your life doing has an impact. So that's one aspect. The other side of it links back to kind of what Julie was saying with a lot of like kind of the autonomy. Again, like I kind of mentioned earlier, I was able to develop my graduate project into a fully fledged research program. Because of that, I have a lot of that freedom and flexibility to kind of shift priorities, shift kind of our research projects based off of kind of the most pressing needs at the time. I develop our own strategic plans. I develop research plans for myself and my staff, making sure that we're kind of reaching those goals. And so it's kind of nice to have that opportunity to do that, especially in kind of a non-academic setting, which is a little bit different, I think, than a lot of, especially nonprofit organizations who, tend to be a little bit more education and advocacy side. My position allows me to have a little bit of both. And then the last thing, I just kind of want to shout out to a lot of the really amazing people that I get to work with as well in this role, from my colleagues and teammates to kind of the different stakeholders that we work with, especially the fish harvesters. I know I kind of alluded to before that, there's kind of some challenges with some dealing with stakeholders. But there are so many people who are engaged with their industries who want to see it continue and thrive and find those ways to sustainably exist in nature. And so there's just some really amazing people out there that I've been able to work with through this job as well.
And I think you guys all three of you touched on something that you find that your current roles are impacting policy and impacting the world we live in today. Is that something that you envisioned when you started your degree here? Like, did you ever imagine that you would be, when you started your degree, that you would be, having such a direct impact, an immediate impact on our marine environment and life here?
I mean, you sure hope so.
Yeah.
Especially when you do these professional programs like MREM or MMM. That is the hope, that you're doing something that will affect change in the long run. I would say that there are sort of like these principles of like who you are and the things that you're looking for. And I think for all three of us, something we were looking for is a place where we can have impact. And sometimes those little nuggets are more important than the job description or exactly the right employment situation or organization. It's about sort of holding true to these ideas about who you are and what does fill your cup in the type of work that you do, because you spend a lot of time at work.
And how about yourself, Frederica?
Oh, yeah, I sort of agree with everything Julie said. I don't have too much more to add to that, honestly. That was pretty much what I was thinking. It's it's just, I mean, you hope to be making some sort of an impact. Maybe I never envisioned myself being like a world leader in something, but certainly on like a small scale with, and with what I'm doing now, freshwater mussels are, pretty niche, but it's still making an impact out there.
Yeah, great. And then the final question I'm going to ask, and this is a classic, is what advice would you give to your past self or current grad students? I'll start with Alex.
Yeah, I would tell myself to take more advantage of different student placements or internships that are only available to you while you're a student. Gain experience in different fields and industries if you can. You know, I think that there's a lot of value in um, test testing out kind of different fields. Um, you know, all of the experiences that you have in all of those positions that you might hold, internships, anything like that, um, is might lead you to different perspectives and strengths that you might not have considered before, and it might actually let you discover what you truly enjoy. Um, that's something that I did. I ended up working in vet clinics, and I realized, oh, I'm glad I didn't go to vet school because this actually isn't a great fit for me. And taking advantage of those types of programs and funding can really help lead you into what it is that you really truly enjoy doing. And it might be something different than what you thought it was going to be. Um, and it's something I wish I took a little bit more advantage of when I was a student. And I'm happy and really grateful for where I am now. But I wish that I had some more of those experiences as well.
Great. And Julie, would you give yourself similar advice, or do you have a separate piece of advice?
I have pearls of wisdom. Some similar to Alex, and I totally agree with, like, try the different things. It's okay to try it and not like it, or to try it and fail. That's part of the process. My first real pearl of advice for especially sort of master's level graduate students is, like, be so open. Be so open to a new idea, a new way of thinking, a new discipline, because your master's, sure, while you're kind of getting more narrow in a project, there's so much opportunity to, like, blow open your thinking, and the way that you approach doing a graduate program is completely different than undergrad. And it's an opportunity to allow yourself to be flexible and find new things. And that's what happened to me in my master's. My second pearl of advice is that no one is going to advocate better for yourself than you are. So when you see things like a top 25 environmentalist under 25, and you think, I think I could be that person, do the self-nomination. Ask someone to do it for you. People are happy to help you along the way, but no one is going to put your name out there in the way that you want better than yourself. Apply for all the things. You never know what is going to come your way. A cover letter is no time to be humble. That's all my advice.
That's great. That's great. And Frederica, how about yourself? What advice would you give to?
Yeah, I agree with both of you, but definitely what Alex was saying about, getting all of that experience. I mentioned earlier in this talk, just taking opportunities as they come. And, even if in the future you look back and you're like, wow, why did I decide to do that? I mean, hindsight's 2020. In that moment, you decided that that was the best idea for you, and it helped you get to where you are now. So no regrets, I suppose. But I think also for me personally, that I would recommend to any, undergrad or graduate student is try to get like a variety of experiences. Even if you know what you want to do, or you think you know what you want to do, it's great to get experience in that one field. But I would, advise people to try anything, everything, whether you play in sports, you're heavily involved in sports, or like volunteer activities that have nothing to do with science. Like if you're really into knitting, like go, be the head of a knitting society. I don't knit. That's just an example, but I think having like just a really wide variety of experiences and, communities you can tap into and that sort of thing would really help in the long run as well, because you never know, down the road, you might want a reference from someone who's seen how well you're able to, handle a table at like an expo or something. You never know when those things are going to come up. So I think that's just really helpful for future like social skills and just advantages to applications when you send them.
Yeah, and I will certainly echo that. That just taking advantage of opportunities that are handed to you that aren't, or opportunities that are available to you, at least, that, I mean, you might not elsewhere. I mean, I applied for this Falling Walls lab thing, this pitch competition. I really didn't know much about it, and I just kind of, it's really been fairly life-changing. And that's something that's happened outside the framework of my degree. And there are many things in the framework of my degree that also, had I not, jumped at the opportunity to, I might have not had as diverse an experience in graduate school. So I think that's really great advice. So we're going to throw it to some audience questions right now. We have received several from YouTube. And the first question I'm going to ask is from Unab, who asks, how should one go about getting involved in the Wildlife Federation area as someone who doesn't have enough experience in the field? I'll start with Alex.
Yeah, I am here with the Wildlife Federation.
Yes.
Yeah. So I will say I don't do any field work in my position. I am actually at a computer-based job. I do a lot of spatial analysis. I do GIS. I create models and do statistical tests. It's a lot of math. It's a lot of kind of more complex things. So field work is not necessarily the only thing out there, and it's doing stuff in the field is not the only way to kind of get involved in wildlife conservation. There's a lot of other avenues. So don't let an inexperience of field work hold you back from where you kind of want to go. Everybody has, I mean, I think that we've kind of touched on this a lot throughout today. Everybody has different backgrounds, different experiences, and all of those experiences have helped shape you into who you are and the skills that you bring to a team. Our team, everybody has completely different experiences. And without each of those experiences, like all of those experiences together is what allows us to succeed. But I mean, it's just seeking those different opportunities that if you are trying to get a little bit more of that practical field skills. I'm not sure if I have an exact sort of direction I can kind of give, but just know that there's transferable skills from kind of any field that you work in, whether it's something that's directly field related from wildlife conservation or something in a completely different field as well.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry. Another question from Emma. Hi, everyone. She says, thank you for sharing your experience. She's interested in the MMM program, and she would like to know what your overall experience with the program was. And she'd like some pros and cons as well. So I'm going to throw this to everybody. Frederica, do you have any pros and cons or an overall experience from the program?
I mean, I did not take the MMM program, so maybe Alex and Julie would be better suited to answer that, but happy to add on to my, for my experience afterwards.
I can add some. I mean, I'm clearly biased because I am currently employed part-time by the program. So I love it. I think it's wonderful. It has evolved so much since I did the program. So reflecting on my exact experience is, I don't think the exact same as what you would get as an incoming MMM student, but it's evolved in the best way. It's become more interdisciplinary, more connections to environmental organizations, to different types of internship hosts and different types of experiences. The only con I would say is that if you're looking for a fully fledged research program and you want to do field data collection, it is tough to get that in MMM. Not impossible if that's your real goal and you know that from the start, but it's tough because the program is so short and we're asking you to do essentially a mini thesis on a condensed timeline. So going out and collecting your own data is just not realistic in that time frame. But if you want more information about the program, you can Google me. That sounds pretentious, but you can Google me and find my contact info, and I'm happy to chat about it or connect you to current students if you'd like to know more.
And do you find those same pros and cons apply for your experience as well, Alex?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Julie said. I, even from my time, and I did the program a couple years after Julie, it has changed even from my time to what it is now. You know, we also take on students, so I supervise students occasionally, and I see what those differences are, and I do think that it is making some of those changes for kind of more diverse sort of internship hosts and opportunities for students, which I think is really fantastic. And clearly you've kind of heard from us today all of the value that program gave to us and how we kind of use it in our day-to-day work. And a similar sort of con, I actually went into the program thinking it was a Master's of Science in Marine Management, but it's a Master's in Marine Management. It's its own separate designation. So I thought it would be more on the science side, and it's not quite there. Not to say that it can't be that for you, because you do have that opportunity through the internship program, and I was able to kind of fulfill my sort of science need through that opportunity. So yeah, if you are looking for something that's a little bit more heavy on the natural science side of things, maybe it's not the right fit for you, but you can make it that if you are kind of dedicated enough to finding those opportunities.
And Frederica, even though you didn't attend the MMM program, in the the Masters of Environmental and Resource Management, did you find you have an overall positive experience? It seemed like you did, but do you have pros and cons that you would be comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same. I mean, it's kind of like a sister program, even though it's
right,
not quite the same. But for me personally, I was one of very few people, I think maybe myself and 2 other people in the program, who actually did like a data-driven final mini thesis. A lot of people I find or found, I don't know if it's still the case today, a lot of my fellow students ended up doing more government based positions and doing a lot of sort of more of the like gray literature or like policy sort of things for their project, where I was lucky enough to be able to go and collect my data in the field and have, people in the lab to help me analyze that data and then using that. So I was able to do that personally. So it is not impossible, like you said, Julie. I think it is very possible if you want to do that, but certainly it is a challenge if you want that like hard science. The rest of the course material and the projects that you do are more than likely not going to focus on that. So it's more, you really have to come in knowing that you want to see it from the more broad management lens and maybe not so much focusing on that hard natural science. But overall, a great experience for sure.
Great. And then finally, Natalie asks, I'm an MSc student at Dow focusing on Atlantic salmon population decline in Cape Breton, but I'm unsure of where my career path, whether government, academic, or NGO. And she'd also like to thank you for your perspective and advice. So I guess the question is, what do you have pros and cons for either path, or do you see that one path is more amenable to her, or would fit her kind of research foci more? We'll start with Julie.
If you're in Atlantic salmon, you can work in any of those spaces. It's more about finding which space feels right for you right now. And maybe you can try a little bit of each, you know, if you can, for example, near the end of my PhD, which admittedly is a different life stage, I was doing my PhD, so that's academia. I was on the board of quite a few NGOs, so I got that sort of NGO fill, and I was working part-time for DFO. And when you get those experiences in parallel, you can kind of compare and contrast and feel out where the right place is for you right now. But there's lots of different paths and lots of different ways that if salmon is what you want to be working on, you can stick in that space, and the sector can change.
And Alex, would you echo that there's different possible, you can try each one? Are there different ways to have your finger in different pots?
Yeah, I would echo everything that Julie said. I don't have the DFO government side of things. I have only worked within the nonprofit side, so I can't speak to the other. But it's everything that I've said before too, right? Like, try those different things, find what drives you. So there's opportunities in each of those rounds.
Great. And there's one last question. Jessica asks, are there internship opportunities for next summer with CWF? If so, where could I find these opportunities? And from a current MREM student.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can share my email. That might be kind of the best way to kind of have that sort of conversation.
Could we also Google you?
Yeah, Google Alex.
You might be able to find me if you Google me. Try Googling me. I don't know what's up there. But yes, we do internships. We had a marine affairs student last summer. We've had students from the University of Toronto. We might be taking on another marine affairs student this upcoming summer. We tend to operate on a very project forward mentality, just the way that our team kind of operates. So the way that an internship would work with us is we would kind of help you develop a research project, which would be linked to your graduate project, your kind of mini thesis there, and help you and give you the tools and resources to conduct that. So we don't really post an internship placement per se. So that's kind of how our team operates. I work on our marine conservation science team. All of our work is focused on whale conservation. But CWF is a large organization. We do have a terrestrial team. We have a freshwater team. We have education teams. We have a whole bunch of programs across Canada. So it really depends on what you're looking for out of an internship, out of a project. I can't speak for the other teams and their capacity to take on students, but if it is something you are interested in, either I can share my email or Google me, try to find me. There's definitely kind of like an info@CWF email you could also send to. Just provide a little bit of information of what your interests are, and it'll get to the right person.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Please note that a recording of today's event will be available on the Dal Science YouTube channel. If you have further questions about today's discussion or graduate programs at Dal, you can visit dal.ca/science or dal.ca/graduate studies. Of course, I'd like to thank our panelists, Julie, Alex, and Frederica, for a very thoughtful and engaging discussion today. And a special thanks to the Faculties of Science and Graduate Studies for hosting another successful Career Connects. As a final remark, of course, if anyone wants to reach out to Alex, Julie, Frederica, if you haven't said
find
that
me on
people
LinkedIn.
can contact you, but you can find her on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions you'd like to ask. So thank you guys all so much for attending. Thanks again. Have a great day. Take care.